opportunity to work with BBC Phil musicians on a series of new technological developments which we're going to premiere at the Festival of Research.
At the BBC Philharmonic, we like to challenge ourselves to reimagine what it is to listen to music or to experience an orchestra. All the great music was original, all the great music really was revolutionary and challenging, whether it's Beethoven or Bach or Mahler. So the idea that we should just be playing the great classics, the great canon, is quite alien to us. We love playing that music, of course, but we always try to put new music and new ideas in the context of the established orchestral canon. So working with composers who take a different approach, who think differently, who work with new technologies, who integrate electronics into their music, who maybe work with different types of ensembles, this is all very much part of our DNA as an orchestra.
The project comes from an application which was developed by my former PhD student Adam Hart for the use of primary school children to help them to learn how to compose.
And some of those ideas that primary school children have brought to the table whilst they've been writing their music using this app has then informed Alan's music, which is now being performed as part of the Festival of Research. And this is typical, I suppose, of the way we work with the university, that we're always trying to be responsive to what's happening, trying to develop the ideas, not to be set in our ways, but to allow ourselves to be challenged to do things differently.
It's important to use these methods to give people a sense of ownership over the activity, because composition should be available to everybody, and technology is one of the ways that we can help to do this. But in classical music, it's tended to be only those who are very, very familiar with notation that are able to do it. And yet, technology can't do everything. So this particular app can help students to think in ways that are actually compositional and not just about layering sounds.
So I'm particularly excited to hear what comes out of this, what Alan's piece is like. I'm particularly excited to see how the collaboration has worked. Because aside from the music, we're also collaborating in the streaming and the broadcast of this. The team across the project is a multidisciplinary team taken from the BBC and from the University of Salford, from the staff and from the students.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for coming to this event, which is part of the University of Salford's Festival of Research, a month-long celebration of new knowledge, new technology, and how it impacts society. Just some housekeeping first. If you hear an emergency alarm sounding, it won't be a drill, so would you please just follow Dock 10 staff to the emergency exits if that happens. Please turn your phones off and please don't record the event. So this event is part of a long-running partnership between the University of Salford and the BBC Philharmonic. The event is being live streamed right now, so you in the hall are being joined by an audience online, and the streaming is being done by staff and students from what we call the Industry Collaboration Zone in the University of Salford. One other collaboration is in the form of one of our DMA students, a doctorate student, Philippe Schwartz, who is in part of the ensemble on euphonium. My name is Alan Williams. I'm Professor of Collaborative Composition at the University of Salford. And the two pieces that we are presenting to you today are both, in a sense, collaborative compositions involving new technology. The second piece is by Rob Laidlow, who's sitting on the front row of the auditorium. And he is a PhD student at the Royal Northern College of Music and is researching in ways of using AI technology, that's artificial intelligence technology, in the composition of pieces for acoustic ensembles. And I'm going to be talking to Rob later, after the performance of my piece. So the first piece is by me and is called The Rivet's Tale. I think those of us who work with our hands So those of us who work with our brains and our mouths more than our bodies and our hands all have perhaps are in a sense of awe for those who do work in more physical jobs. And there's a family legend that my great-grandfather was a riveter on the Belfast shipyards. Well, it's true he was, and that was one of the riveters who made the Titanic. That came up, and I was reminded of this when I was working with my colleague, Dr. Adam Hart, and students from St. Peter and St. John Cathedral School, which is a local school in Salford right next to the cathedral, on the collaborative project that those in the hall have just seen a short video about. The piece was a collaboration again with the BBC Philharmonic. We had 4 musicians from the Philharmonic in the school, and they were helping to create music using a new piece of technology based on a tablet that Dr. Adam Hart has created, which is called Paynter. And the technology allows primary-age children to develop compositional ideas in ways which is not just about sort of layering one sound over another. So the process was that we went into the school with 4 musicians from the Philharmonic, and they tried some ideas out. One of the groups was working on a story based on the Titanic, and as a result of this storytelling process, the musicians themselves came up with some initial ideas which we recorded, and then we loaded them up, or Adam loaded them up into the app. And through the process of manipulation, of placing those ideas in various places on the app, these ideas changed. And at the end of the process, once we visited 4 or 5 times to the school, I then transcribed the audio results that came out of the Paynter app, and for an ensemble, and we played those. And now from those ideas, some of which originated with the musicians, and some of which originated with the students, the primary school students, I put together a much longer piece, which is based on a lot of those ideas. One of them, for example, is the main sort of big theme. And I just would like to ask Ellie, who was one of the members of the original group, could you just play the cello theme that you played in the original group, in the original piece? Thank you very much. That theme, all of the notes for that theme were present in the work that was created by the students. I changed the rhythm a bit and occasionally just tweaked one of the notes in terms to shape it a little bit. But the actual origin of that theme was I don't know who actually, but one of the 7 or 8 year olds in the class that we were working with. I wish I'd written it actually, it's a really nice tune. But so I thought it was so good that it's the main material for the piece. There are other sounds. The piece, actually, the process pushed me out of my comfort zone as a composer, that it made me work with more extended techniques, so some strange sounds that were to do with construction and things like this. And also the actual act of using the app itself made me look for sounds that I hadn't originally envisaged. So for example, there was a trumpet sound, just a simple low trumpet note, but when it was placed on the app, Paynter, and placed down at the bottom of the page, it suddenly sounded like a ship's horn. And then I was looking for that sound on the ensemble, and hence why Philippe, who's a great euphonium player, got involved. So most of the material comes from that process. So it's a kind of dialogue with material that I didn't originally create. So I'd like at this time to introduce our conductor for today, Jack Sheen, and the ensemble from the BBC Philharmonic. Thank you very much. Sorry. Seamlessly choreographed, as you can see. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to invite the second composer, Rob Laidlow, to come and join me at this carefully placed coffee table, on which there is no coffee. And we will talk about the concerns and technologies that went into Rob's piece. So Rob, what I know about your project mainly is derived from having been interviewed by Tom Service on Music Matters recently, so congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
And you use artificial intelligence in your in the construction of your pieces. Do you want to say something about how you do that?
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, AI is obviously a huge area in all sorts of fields in life at the moment, in art or in transport, automation or whatever it is. And there's lots of ways you can use it in interesting ways. This piece today, I've been collaborating with a genius computer scientist called Christine Payne, and she developed this artificial intelligence network that has learnt from all sorts of music throughout time and all over the world. And it's looked at this music and it's trained on it and sort of tried to infer rules about how music works and what we listen to and what's interesting and what's not. And then we provided it with all of my music, so all of my life's work as such that it is at the moment, and sort of topped it off on that. So in this piece, it's a collaboration in the same way that your piece is a collaboration. And I feel like I'm collaborating with this algorithm, which is coming out with different ideas, some of which are good, some of which are not so good, some of which are very interesting, some of which could be interesting if they're taken in a different direction. And they're all sort of got this tinge of it, trying to respond to what I do in my music, which is really exciting.
So do you feel like you're in dialogue with yourself, or do you think do you feel like you're in dialogue with something else?
It's a really good question. It is definitely something else. It's certainly not. It's obviously not working with another person, but it's not working with an algorithm that simply just does what it does and doesn't mind who I am. It's like this sort of strange mirror world that the music exists in, that it produces, where it sort of tries to think about what I do in my music, and what it learns from my music is actually really interesting, because it's not always the things that you expect. What it mirrors in my music might be something I hadn't really thought of before, and makes me think about it in a new light in compositionally.
So it's listening to you?
Yes, that's right, yeah. and I'm listening to it.
Yeah, you're listening to it, yeah, okay, yeah. So obviously, many people have concerns about the use of artificial intelligence in numerous spheres of life, as you've said. Isn't this a place where actually music should be just really just produced by humans, because we don't need artificial intelligence? How do you respond? You must have had people say that to you.
Yeah, I think it's an understanding of what you want to do with AI, and there's lots of, as I said, there's lots of different things you can do. There's one whole wing of AI where people are working to replace certain types of music, and certainly certain types of composers as well. Maybe people who write music that goes on in the background of adverts and that kind of thing. I think that that kind of music is much more likely to be at risk of artificial intelligence sort of infringement, as it were, rather than some other types of music. For example, the kinds of music where people are really there just to listen to the music rather than as an ancillary means. I still think that people, the audience, want to hear a connection with some kind of human. But furthermore, as well, especially in this piece today, it's less a case of anything being replaced. It's very rare in this piece you're about to hear that really anything is written by the AI. That's not really how I've worked with it. It's more that I'm using the AI as like a creative catalyst, so it can sort of come up with all these ideas. Some of them I wouldn't have thought of. Some of them I think, well, this would be really interesting if I expand this. And also just thinking about the way that it learns is very fascinating as well.
Now, the other thing I wanted to ask you about, because I think it's really audible in your music, actually, is the fact that you're a jazz musician.
Yes.
And the worlds of computing and the world of jazz appear to be kind of, light years apart. But how do you think there's anything in common between that?
I think there can be. In both cases, sometimes you don't always have complete control over all ends of the compositional process. So maybe if you're writing a piece for improvising musicians, they must do things that you didn't think of, otherwise you might as well just write it all out. And the same at the other end of the process, maybe with AI, it's coming up with ideas, at least in this piece, that I didn't think of. I didn't have a huge level of control over some of the materials in this piece, but then what you do with them, how you develop them into a piece, is under your control. And I think that is actually quite similar with the world of jazz as well.
So part of it is a dialogue, and part of it is about, in both areas, is about ceding some area of control.
Yeah.
Do you think that's about? Do you think? I mean, I don't want to read into your answer, but is the world really sort of ready for a different model of the composer in which there's more dialogue, more listening, and less kind of control?
Yeah, I've thought about this quite a lot, especially in terms of composers who maybe create music for video games, for example. I think that we might be moving towards a place where the composers become more of curators of musical experiences that people, in their own homes experience. And thinking about video games especially, you could train an AI to respond exactly to the player as they're playing it in real time, which is something that no composer obviously can do. You can't have a real human composer compose in real time for any given player, but you could do that with AI. The question for the composer then becomes, how do I weave this into an experience that's exciting and useful and interesting? And I think that probably applies for lots of different areas, actually.
Now, one last question. The title, which I haven't got written in piece in front of me. Why can't I remember the title?
It's Three Interstachios is the name of it, and this is again another little reference to artificial intelligence. So there's this great computational artist called Ross Goodwin who works with text AI. So he trains AIs on different texts and produces poems and little short literature pieces or whatever using the results. And he trained an AI on the English dictionary. So he showed the English dictionary to an AI and asked it to work out the relationship, or what it thinks the relationship is, between words and their definitions. And once it said, yep, Ross, I've done that, then he asked it to produce new words and then to define these words as well. So this word interstachio was invented by this bot called Lexiconja, and it means a short piece of music or metal. And in this piece, it's 3 short pieces of music, and you will hear in the percussion several short pieces of metal as well.
Thank you very much. Rob, thank you very much for talking to us and showing us your ideas.
Thank you.
And now, can I introduce again Jack Sheen to perform Rob Laidlow's Three Interstachios.
Mm-hmm.